I'm Jack Hanna, Biden delegate to the Democratic National Convention, former chair of the Pennsylvania State Committee, and a member of the National Infrastructure Bank Coalition. I would like to welcome you all to the Democratic National Convention. Thank you for participating in this 90-minute webinar on the National Infrastructure Bank. This bank is modeled on the same banks that were used by 4 great American presidents to defend our country in a time of crisis. In the current 2020 Democratic platform, there are several mentions of a national infrastructure bank. But what exactly does that mean? You will hear from delegates to the convention, members of the DNC, elected officials, labor leaders on why they support this particular national infrastructure bank. We need to ensure that the next president of the United States walks in the footsteps of our previous great presidents and uses the National Infrastructure Bank to save our nation.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alfeka Mutardi, and I am a macroeconomist with the Coalition for a National Infrastructure Bank. And I'd like to talk to you today about 3 things. First of all, what is the National Infrastructure Bank that is defined in a House Bill HR 6422, and how does it work? And how is it different from other infrastructure bank proposals? And then what will be the effect of this bank on our nation's economy? So other speakers are going to tell you that we've had 4 infrastructure banks in our nation's past and how they perform so well to build infrastructure. This iteration around, what we've done is to ask ourselves the question, what would it take to build and repair out all of our infrastructure in the United States if we were not constrained by budgets in any way, if we had the full funding to fix and repair and build out everything? So what we did was we went to the American Society of Civil Engineers, who in their 2017 report said, we need $4.6 trillion just to bring infrastructure up to a state of good repair. And that body covers public infrastructure, including roads, bridges, transit, waterworks, airports, rail, and some other large projects, schools. And they also estimate that of that 4.6 trillion, about half of it should be funded through normal processes. And that includes reauthorization bills of the federal government to provide grants and loans. It also includes projects developed by state and local governments using either bonds or public-private partnerships, for example, airports is an example. That 4.6 trillion, that half of that, 2.5 trillion, is covered by those means if that funding comes forward. So the idea of the National Infrastructure Bank is we want to cover all of our infrastructure needs. So we're going to cover the remaining 2.1 trillion that is definitely not covered. Now keep in mind, these estimates by the engineers were done 4 years ago. So if they should come out with new estimations, then these amounts might be much, much higher because infrastructure investment has a very high rate of inflation as time goes on. So we want to cover 2.1 trillion. And then in addition, we want to cover some projects that the engineers don't cover, like high-speed rail, affordable housing, and broadband everywhere, and some large water projects as well. That will bring the total in our estimation at present up to 4 trillion. So we are proposing in HR 6422 a bank that is 4 trillion large to cover all infrastructure needs in the United States in every single state. Now we estimate that spending on this magnitude will create at least 25 million jobs. And I'm going to come to the how that's going to help the economy in just a moment. But I want to discuss how this bank is configured and how it works. So this is a public bank to lend only for infrastructure, and it is actually capitalized with existing Treasury debt that is held by large institutional savers like pension funds or corporations or foreign governments who might want to invest their treasuries in the National Infrastructure Bank. They would do this. We need about $500 billion in order to capitalize adequately this $4 trillion that we're going to lend. So these investors would invest their treasuries into the National Infrastructure Bank in exchange for preferred stock in the bank that would pay an extra 2% more than they're earning on their treasuries. That's to entice them to bring their treasuries in. That additional 2% will initially come from the federal budget. That'll be about $10 billion a year, but will be paid back through the earnings of the bank, as I'll describe in just a moment. So that perfectly capitalizes the bank. And now this bank, which is a deposit money bank, is ready to start making loans, just like any commercial bank provides loans. Anybody that would come in for a loan from the National Infrastructure Bank would sign a loan note, and the bank would put that up in their assets as a loan, and then would create a deposit in that borrower's name for them to use for their infrastructure project. That's how where the funding comes from for the projects. The bank would charge about 2% interest rate, the treasury bond rate, or 2% interest rate, which is the floor on the interest rate lending. So that would generate, at full loan capacity, that would generate earnings of the bank of about $80 billion a year. And the bank would use its earnings to pay for its overhead and workers, just like any commercial bank does, to set aside loan loss provisions to pay interest on loans. And then out of the $80 billion, it should have funding left over to reimburse the federal government the $10 billion a year that it's taking off on the capitalization side as a dividend to government, since the government is the part owner in this bank. The reason for configuring the bank in this way is so that this National Infrastructure Bank, with regard to the federal government, will be budget neutral, will not require any new taxes, such as a gas tax or anything like that, and will not create any new federal debt. And that's very important in this time of our economy, when this year's fiscal deficit is estimated could run as much as $4 trillion and should be also very large next year as well. So we wanted to make this bank appealable to both Democrats and Republicans because it is federal budget neutral. So who would these lenders be that would come in for infrastructure projects? They would be state and local governments. The lending would be distributed across everybody's balance sheet. And the bank would entertain even bundled projects. So for example, if a mayor wanted to come in with infrastructure bundled project that would build affordable housing, fix the water pipes in the city streets that are contaminated with lead, build more roads and bridges, and hook up mass transit, build out mass transit and hook it up to areas where people live, then everybody would take a share in the loans for the bundled project. And by the way, it's estimated that spending $4 trillion on infrastructure projects would generate at least 25 million new permanent jobs, paying Davis-Bacon wages, which would need to hire folks from every single district where infrastructure is being built out. So there'll be large training programs to train folks for these new competitive jobs in the latest industries and provide them with sustainable employment for many, many years to come. This will hire from among all of the folks that are now out of work. So let me talk about the economy for just a minute. In this COVID world, our economy has been devastated by the shutdown, and we're not even sure when the shutdown will end. It's affected everything. We now have at least 30 million folks who are taking unemployment assistance of one kind or another. Every month or every week, it seems, about another million are added onto the unemployment rolls, although some are rolling back off again. But altogether, even after the economy fully reopens back up, many of these jobs will not return. So this bank can hire right away and train right away for folks that are made permanently unemployed on account of the COVID-19 shutdown. And just to give you the scale of how large this shutdown has been, the second quarter statistics showed that our gross domestic product contracted by 1/3. So altogether, in a year's worth of production, our economy produces maybe $20 trillion worth of products, and a third shutdown means that we lost $7 trillion worth of output over this time. And that means we lost $7 trillion worth of income over this time, which we need to fill out with new jobs. So this is the only proposal. While there's proposals in the government for providing stimulus packages, those packages don't necessarily contribute to new job creation, whereas this infrastructure bank does that fully. This bank will not only improve the short-term effect of the economy by hiring from among the 25 million folks who are now unemployed, but in the long run, it will improve the productivity of the economy, improve the business environment. It will put money into people's pockets in the middle. That will increase demand and be better for businesses. And we should be able to get our growth rates back up to the 5% level, which is where they were the last time that a national infrastructure bank was in place. Now, how does this bank differ from other infrastructure bank proposals? Currently in the 116th Congress, there are four or five other national infrastructure banks proposals. We think that this infrastructure bank proposal, however, has a high degree of advantages over the others for two reasons. First of all, it's the scale of the bank. At $4 trillion, it's the largest bank geared in order to cover all infrastructure projects in the economy. And by virtue of covering all those projects, it will hire the most workers out of this recession. The second thing is it's a bank dedicated totally to infrastructure, which can coalesce and direct and better plan infrastructure spending out into the future. It's dedicated also to increasing economic corridors of growth in different areas of the country. Belts, for example, from Birmingham, Alabama to Raleigh, North Carolina, or from Houston up through the center of Texas into the Farm Belt, or along the Pacific coastal regions. So these economic corridors are very important for sustaining economic growth all across the United States. We think that this will get growth rates up to 5%, as I've said. That's based on the most recent example of a national infrastructure bank when growth rates got that high, and also it's based on current computer modeling. So for all those reasons, we think because this bank is large enough to cover everything, will create 25 million new jobs, is quite different from other infrastructure banks because it is a central area for organizing infrastructure projects according to what's needed and according to the needs of local areas. It has a very strong rural development component to it. It has a very strong inner city development to refurbish areas in Rust Belt cities. It simply has the scale and the organization to do the job. So we hope that you will contract your congressman and ask them to help support H.R. 6422, a national infrastructure bank for the United States. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bob Lynn. I am a retired union organizer with Plumbers and Pipe Fitters out of Toledo, Ohio, Local 50. And I have been working with the National Infrastructure Bank Coalition for about 3.5 years now, trying to get this infrastructure bank passed into law. The reason that the National Infrastructure Bank is so important, in my opinion, is that we as a country have got to invest in our infrastructure. Today, right now, China spends about 8% of their GDP on infrastructure. The European Union spends about 5.5% of GDP, and the United States currently spends about 2.5% of their GDP on infrastructure. This is not acceptable when it comes to being able to invest in ourselves and to be able to be the country that we deserve and need to be. With that being said, the National Infrastructure Bank is not a new idea. In fact, this idea was first thought about by Alexander Hamilton with George Washington right after the Revolutionary War, which set this country up to be able to make happen, and a constitution was adopted. The reason the bank came into existence was all the states had taken on great debt in order to fight the Revolutionary War. And in order to be able to come up with a concept to be able to finance the investment that was necessary in this country, Alexander Hamilton came up with the brilliant idea to be able to go and repurchase that outstanding debt in exchange for an increase in the amount of payments or dividends paid out on that debt. That's kind of what we're talking about here. If you've listened to this, you'll hear Al-Feka Mutardi will talk about, or has talked about, the repurchasing of $500 billion in outstanding treasuries in order to be able to finance this bank. So this concept is really important. And why is it important? Well, today we continue to do most of our infrastructure investing through appropriations. And when it's always through appropriation, that gets into, unfortunately, our current tribal system, where if it's a Democratic idea or a Republican idea, the other side has to be against it. We as America can't afford to be against infrastructure. Infrastructure in this country is desperately important to be able to put people back to work, to be able to invest in each other, and to be able to create the manufacturing that's necessary in this country. As I said, although Alexander Hamilton was the first one to do this bank, it has been done 3 other times beside that. John Quincy Adams had the second bank that was created. And then we had Abraham Lincoln, who used the bank. And probably the most famous one that we probably have at least an inkling of is FDR. FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, wound up using the Reconstruction Finance Corporation as his national infrastructure bank. And what that allowed us to be able to do in this country was to get out of the Great Depression and to win World War II. If you think about what conditions were like when he came into office to be able to do that, the rural electrification in this country was like 10 to 15%. By the time he left and the bank actually closed, it was 90% of the electrification of this country had taken place. And that was done because of investment in infrastructure in this country. The Tennessee Valley Authority, for example, is another fine example where he took the money to be able to invest in the building and controlling the Tennessee River with a series of dams, et cetera, to generate the electricity that was necessary in those communities and be able to help lift that community up and with the poverty that was currently throughout that whole region. These are just small examples of how an investment by a national infrastructure bank took place. Now, today, as we look around, largely all the infrastructure that we do, whether it's the Highway Trust Fund, the water infrastructure funds, et cetera, are done through appropriations. That means everybody has to go agree, this is how much money we're going to invest in it to be able to do that, set that up, and then it has to go through that whole process. Each one of those is in a silo. And the challenge gets to be is that infrastructure is not a silo business. If you go and you want to fix a community, wouldn't it be nice to be able to tear up the road once, put in the sewer system, put in the water system, put in the electrical lines underground so that they don't get blown over by storms or hurricanes, et cetera, and to be able to have that kind of a plan instead of having to continually do it piecemeal as we go forward. This National Infrastructure Bank has that ability to be able to make this happen. It is vitally important that when we look at how we invest in America, we need to do it smartly, and we need to be able to do it where it's most cost effective. One of the things that is probably very surprising is that every time this bank has been done, there have been naysayers everywhere who have always said, this is a bad idea. It will never work. And at the end of the time, all 4 banks entered in the black. They made a profit. They weren't designed to make profits. That's not what this bank is about. This bank is not going out and saying we have to have 10% return, we have to have 5% return. This bank is about building infrastructure. Because once the infrastructure is built, then manufacturing and businesses and people can start to take advantage of that. We're putting in the base, the most important, the foundation for our economy to be able to move forward. And that is why this bank is so important. The beauty of this bank is it's scalable. Right now, we are proposing a $4 trillion bank. But if things continue to take a huge downturn and we need more money, we can always repurchase more debt and then be able to actually go and increase the size of the bank so that it addresses all the needs throughout the country. Investing in America is what we have to do. there's three things that businesses look for when they come into a community. They look for quality education, they look for a qualified and quality workforce, and they look for infrastructure. And the thing that we have failed in the last 40 years to do is actually invest in infrastructure in this country. We need to do that today. We cannot wait any longer. It's very important to be able to do it. And so I urge all of you watching this webinar to reach out to your congressperson, reach out to your senator, reach out to those who have influence to be able to encourage them to investigate this National Infrastructure Bank. Because at the end of the day, public-private partnerships are a small piece of what we need to do. We have so much infrastructure that needs to get fixed, and private companies are not necessarily interested in some of the most important stuff that needs to get done because it generates very little income. But we need to have that baseline. We need to have that foundation established. That's what's most important. So I hope you have a great convention as you're going on here today. And at the same time, we hope that you'll spread the word on the National Infrastructure Bank, do some investigation, and get involved in this.
Greetings, distinguished delegates. I am Stephen Fenberg, biographer of Jesse Jones, who was chairman of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation during the Great Depression and World War II. Republican President Herbert Hoover initiated the RFC during his last year in office, even though he thought using legislation to combat the Great Depression was like passing a law to stop a hurricane. It's a good thing President Franklin Roosevelt knew better. As soon as he was inaugurated, he supercharged the RFC and made Texas banker and developer and former DNC finance chair, Jesse Jones, the RFC's chairman. Jones had served in Herbert Hoover's RFC, and with great relevance today, he observed that if Hoover's RFC hadn't been so timid and slow, if it had judiciously loaned and invested $5 to $7 billion in 1931 and 1932, the entire catastrophe of the Great Depression could have been averted. Under Jones's and FDR's leadership, the RFC became the nation's largest bank and biggest investor. It saved thousands of homes, farms, banks, and businesses. It built aqueducts, tunnels, and bridges throughout the nation. It saved the railroads and even financed the development of high-speed trains. It brought electricity to rural Americans and even sold them appliances on credit so they could plug into the modern age. It helped communities rebuild their towns and cities after natural disasters. And it even helped farmers store their crops until prices rose so they could save their land. And here's the kicker. The RFC provided these life-saving services throughout the nation and helped our nation's citizens and made money for the federal government's taxpayers, you and me, while doing so. The RFC can do this all over again through a new national infrastructure bank that duplicates these successful strategies that helped save our nation during two of its most challenging events in the 20th century. But the RFC did not stop with economic recovery. As World War loomed, Jones and FDR shifted the RFC's focus from domestic economics to global defense. And just as we are unprepared today to combat the coronavirus and climate change, we were unprepared then to fight World War. The US military ranked 17th in the world. We did not have the capacity to manufacture anti-aircraft ammunition or military equipment until the RFC stepped in. 2 years before the Pearl Harbor attacks, the RFC proactively began assembling strategic materials from around the world, most notably tin and rubber. And then it built the gargantuan plants and leased them to corporations to manufacture the trucks tanks, ships, and planes that were required to fight and win World War II. The RFC even orchestrated the development of synthetic rubber from the lab to mass production, just as the Japanese captured our supply of natural rubber in the Pacific. Without the federal government's initiative and investment through the RFC, the Allied forces would have been stuck in place and unable to fight. When the last synthetic rubber plant was sold by the federal government to private interests in 1955, the New York Times reported the synthetic rubber initiative was second only to the atomic energy program. We can do great things again with a new infrastructure bank. We can rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, create new jobs, spur manufacturing, help communities and individuals rebuild their homes and retrofit them so they're storm resistant and energy efficient. We can enhance the common good and improve national security by embracing the power of good government and unleashing a national infrastructure bank that can duplicate what the RFC did not that long ago, that restored and replenished our vulnerable nation. Thank you so much and have a great convention.
Good day. My name is Stan Forzik. I'm a retired executive from Amtrak specializing in infrastructure and finance. I also spent some time in a management role in an energy consulting firm. I have my own consulting firm now, and I'm a member of the advisory board for the Coalition for National Infrastructure Bank. Usually when I talk on the Hill or with state reps or local reps, I speak about infrastructure and the state of infrastructure in this country. All of us know that there's a lot of it that's 200 years old, and it's really decaying and falling apart. But I don't want to talk about infrastructure per se today. I want to talk about how we get to the point where people understand what the bank is trying to accomplish, how we go about setting it up, approving the legislation, and moving forward. And to do that, I have a little discussion that I want to put out there as to why things are a little bit different today than they were many years ago, when Alexander Hamilton first came up with the idea of a national infrastructure bank. And then again, when FDR did his national infrastructure bank, the mindset of those two gentlemen was different than what we have today. The mindset was, let's do what's right for the country, for moving things along, building the infrastructure, changing from agriculture to manufacturing, from getting us out of the Great Depression, setting up work programs for millions of people, and retooling again for World War II and taking us all the way through there. Those two gentlemen had it in their mind that that's what they wanted to do. There was no question about how much money it was going to take. In today's world, we're fixated on what the cost is for infrastructure. Someone comes along with a project that's $200 billion and people keel over. They don't want to listen to it. They lose sight of it. They don't want to focus in on it because the dollar figure is too great. They're not thinking about the betterment of the country. They're not thinking about what is going to happen after this project is finalized and how it creates more wealth than just monetary wealth for this country. So in everything that Hamilton and FDR did, it was for the betterment of the country. They never said what it was going to cost. They didn't care what it cost. They just wanted to get the job done. And I can tell you that in the early 70s, going all the way up to the early 80s, that it was very hard to develop capital projects, whether it be for manufacturing and construction, because I was in charge of finance for Amtrak. And no matter what was asked for, no matter how much it was, $100 million for capital improvements. Every time that we asked for money, Amtrak asked for money, we were not given it. It was always, we couldn't afford to do it. And you're forcing your project managers to reduce the scope of certain projects, which creates an issue. And that's why safety comes into view and other things come into view, because the project's never finished. So in those 60 years, the mindset changed from the betterment of the country to how much is it going to cost, and we really could not afford it. After that, going into the 90s and the 2000s, manufacturing, which now is costing a lot of money within this country, became unaffordable by certain companies and people. And manufacturing was moved and outsourced and brought offshore. Construction equipment is the same way. It was done offshore. And now we're sitting back in today's world and finding out that manufacturing needs to come back because people in other countries are sticking it to us, and we need to bring it back. I had the opportunity in the late 80s. Amtrak had been conveyed all of the infrastructure throughout the United States. Most of it was in the Northeast Corridor. And the Northeast Corridor contains three tunnels that separate New Jersey and Long Island from Manhattan. Two of those tunnels are the North River tunnels that you go from Secaucus, New Jersey, under the Hudson River, into Manhattan, into Penn Station, New York. I had the opportunity to visit those tunnels in 1988, 1989, and Amtrak had basically said through its engineering department into the FRA and DOT that the tunnels were deteriorating and something had to get done. We requested that it be part of a capital program to do something with them. If you notice, nothing is getting done. People joined together. They tried to create projects. Right now it's being called the Gateway Project. And it basically consists of rehabilitating those two tunnels, putting in a new Penn Station, which is already there, and the tracks are already there, with just a change of buildings, and a much larger station above ground, and everything would be interconnected. They're still bickering about it. New Jersey was going to support New York, who was going to support the Port Authority for both states, and the federal government was going to kick in. All of a sudden, people's egos got in the way, and money was subtracted from the project. Although the project has done small little things that are out there, like the West Side Yard and different things like that, there still is no work being done on the rehabilitation of those tunnels. And those tunnels are critical to commerce between the two states. And it's really 20% of the national GDP. Hundreds of thousands of people move back and forth in those tunnels, whether it be on Amtrak or commuter railroads. In 1962, I had the opportunity to listen and watch President Kennedy's speech regarding the project to put a man on the moon and returning him safe to Earth. All right, that was a very large infrastructure project. That speech, along with the rest of his speeches dealing with how to move forward, no one mentioned how much it was going to be. People just got the job done for the betterment of the country, for the betterment of mankind.
Thanks for joining us today. We have a panel of labor leaders to discuss the National Infrastructure Bank Act of 2020, which is H.R. 6422. We'll discuss the impact and possibilities of making the huge investment into infrastructure of America, which sadly has been neglected for the last 40 years. Without further ado, let's get to our fine panel. And we'll have David Cameron, if you could please introduce yourself.
Great, thank you, Bob. Yes, my name is David Cameron, and I'm the assistant to the director of the Teamsters Rail Conference. We represent over 70,000 locomotive engineers and maintenance of way guys. And our interest is in seeing a renaissance of passenger rail in the United States. And there are currently 11 high-speed rail corridors that are designated by the FRA, the Federal Railroad Administration. And we do have construction going on in California. They're working on a 500-mile system. The first 171 miles are being constructed in the Central Valley of California. And we have in Texas a line that will go from Houston to Dallas. In the Virgin Trains in Nevada is building a line that's start construction this year that will go from Las Vegas to Victorville and then on to Palmdale and connect with the system in California. And then there are the other high-speed rail corridors that can be completed, but they need the money. They need the investments. And this infrastructure bank bill provides, at this point, $650 billion for the construction of these high-speed rail corridors. And not only does it give jobs to our members, it gives jobs to construction trades and the building trades division. It is good for our economy. It is good for its high-paying jobs, and it provides a clean, environmentally safe transportation system to connect major cities, mega regions like Los Angeles and San Francisco. So this kind of investment can only really be done with the help of the federal government, and the infrastructure bank provides a very fundamental structure in which states can apply for loans and help complete construction of these projects.
Thank you, David. Tom Carey, please.
Hello, brothers and sisters. I'm Thomas Carey. I'm the president of the Westchester Putnam Central Labor Body, AFL-CIO here in New York. I'm a third-generation steam fitter and business representative for the United Association of Plumbers and Steamfitters, Local 21. I'm also an at-large delegate to the Democratic National Convention. I wholeheartedly endorse and fully support H.R. 6422, the National Infrastructure Bank bill. As a labor leader here in New York, H.R. 6422 encompasses everything labor unions fight for on a daily basis. Davis-Bacon wages, project labor agreements, and Buy American policies. We talk about infrastructure constantly, yet our demands increase steadily. Many think of infrastructure as roads and bridges, and they are correct in that sense, but there are so much more we need to address. Our delicate water supply, dams and water treatment facilities, wastewater treatment plants, our energy needs, nuclear, coal, gas, solar, wind, and support clean energy initiatives, communication, high-speed internet, etc. Infrastructure is the foundation that keeps everything else together. H.R. 6422 will support not only these projects today, but projects for our children and our grandchildren. I urge each and every one of you, and I'm looking at you, and even you over there in the blue shirt, to tell a friend, tell a loved one, but most importantly, tell your local, county, state, and national local elected officials to support H.R. 6422. Let's keep our country out front and stay ahead of our needs. Thank you all.
Thanks, Tom. Laura Quick.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Laura Quick. I am a Teamster out of Local 776, which is in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I was in 2016 as a political organizer for the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. I am also an elected member to the Pennsylvania Democratic Committee, and I just recently authored a resolution to support the National Infrastructure Bank, which passed at our last state committee meeting. I've come on board to this initiative because its time has come. We needed infrastructure way before COVID-19 pandemic happened, but now as we enter into an unprecedented time since the Great Depression as far as economics go, we need the National Infrastructure Bank now. So I am very much, I have a sense of urgency on how we need to get this HR 6422 to come to pass and to actually start getting the wheels rolling on getting our economy up and running.
Thank you, Laura. Jason Parker.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Parker. I'm the president of Virginia State Building Construction Trades Council. I'm a 30-year electrician and a 30-year proud member of the IBEW, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Local Union 1340. I'm an executive board member of the AFL-CIO Virginia, and we support the National Infrastructure Bank for the obvious reasons that our infrastructure has a D+ rating. And it's going to take many, many, many people and trillions of dollars to fix it. And our trade competitors, like China, right now are utilizing a national infrastructure bank for themselves, and they're beating us at our own punch. And I believe it's time that we got back to basics, rebuild our infrastructure, and bring back the manufacturing for the United States of America.
Thank you, Jason. And last but certainly not least, Erica White.
My name is Erica White. I am with Communication Workers of America, 4319. I serve both as a local officer out of Toledo, Ohio, also at the Greater Northwest Ohio AFL-CIO as the vice president, and as I serve on the national executive board with Communication Workers of America also. So CWA definitely supports the efforts and encourage building of high-speed internet networks in our economy. This is what millions of Americans need. Not only is it something we need as far as what we see what's happening with COVID-19 and just the infrastructure build out, but also supplying jobs. And we're talking about what everyone else said, good paying jobs. And just July 1st, the House of Representatives passed the Infrastructure Bill Moving Forward Act. So of course we support House Resolution 6422 because of what it does. We have to begin investing in broadband expansion. It's critical. And it's going to take up to estimated $350 billion to deploy nationally broadband. Okay, we're just talking about it needs a complete overhaul where we're headed, because though we're looking at underserved populations that are served by broadband that cannot afford to decrease in the future investments. So as far as where we stand with Communication Works of America 4319 locally, we definitely support this bill because we can no longer continue to lag behind as far as nationally, globally, or even where we are locally as where broadband is in our country. And we have to continue to push the US Congress forward where broadband is needed and also where jobs need to be created.
Thank you, Erica. And my name is Bob Lynn. I'm a retired union organizer with Plumbers and Pipe Fitters, Local 50 here in Toledo, Ohio. And I have been involved with the National Infrastructure Bank Coalition for 3.5, 4 years now, trying to get it introduced. The great news is that on March 31st of this year, 2020, we actually got the bill introduced. The bill was introduced by Representative Danny Davis of Illinois and Seth Moulton from Massachusetts. And we are very happy to see that the bill was introduced. We feel that the timing is right for this bill to be the answer to the current conditions that are going on. With COVID-19 pandemic going on, the current recession, possible depression that could be awaiting us as things continue to go on. We are really reaching a crossroads where we are going to need this kind of investment. And the serious thing about this National Infrastructure Bank, the National Infrastructure Bank is designed to invest strictly in infrastructure. I always like to quote my friend Jason Parker when he tells me about the 3 things that you need in a community for somebody to relocate. And I'm going to steal a line from him while I got it real quick here. Number 1, you got to have a quality education system. You need a quality workforce. And number 3, and one of the things that's probably lacking the most in the United States right now is infrastructure. Those are the 3 things a company looks at when they want to come into a community. So, Jason, I stole your line. You're going to have to come up with a new one. With that being said, what I want to talk about now here as we go on, in terms of the labor movement, what is exciting about the huge investment in the infrastructure bank that we're doing, and what will it mean to some of your members? Can I hand it off to Jason?
So what would mean to my members is obviously man hours work. You know, we trained for 5 years, I know, in the IBW, and that's just representing one of the building trades. We trained for 5 years to become the top level craftspeople in our field. And the same goes with the UA, our carpenters, AML carpenters. And for us, we have the ability to scale up. And you hear this a lot about workforce development. When you have big projects come into an area, you know, they always fret and worry about quality of the workforce they're going to have. But we have the ability to scale up our education system to whatever challenges are needed. And so for us, it'd be the ability to take young people today, give them a very real career, one that starts off with retirement, with healthcare, and a living wage. And we would be able to transform so many lives and transform our community at the same time. And so it is the gift that we keep on giving for everybody involved if an infrastructure project came into the area and carried good wages with it and good conditions.
Thanks, Jason. With that being said, Laura, being that you've worked so hard there in Pennsylvania to be able to get this introduced, can you tell us about labor's role to be able to talk to our elected officials, to make sure that they understand labor's perspective, to be able to make that happen? Kind of put that in real terms, if you would.
Yes, I've seen on the ground firsthand, at least the way Teamsters and other labor organizations can organize people on the ground, and that's what we need to make sure that our government understands that we're tired of the deadlock that happens every time, whenever it comes. I remember so many times, especially in the beginning of this administration, it's infrastructure week, and by the end of the week, nothing has been done. And this is the best way to not circumvent. We're not trying to get anybody out of the picture. We're trying to get something done that leads forward. So this National Infrastructure Bank will be instrumental. It will be accountable to Congress, but it won't be governed by the political whims, whatever the way the political wind is blowing. And this is where labor organization can take us over that hump, and let's get things actually starting going in the various. Even though the National Infrastructure Bank is a national initiative, it's going to benefit state and local municipalities and governments. So this is a great way to think globally, think nationally, and act locally. And I think labor organizations have been historically instrumental in getting those type of initiatives forward. Specifically with the Teamsters, I know I'm part of the Women's Caucus, and we've looked over the years of the women Teamsters how many times they've gotten policies involved that they've taken. We've taken buses down to Washington D.C. And all kinds of organizational ways of getting our elected leaders' attention. So I think this is the perfect people, the perfect conduit for the result we want to have.
David, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself here. I know that you had, along with everybody that's on this call, has been instrumental in trying to get resolutions passed and spreading the word about the bank. What are you currently working on, and how could others get involved if they feel so inclined?
Well, I'm also a former officer over at APTA, the American Public Transportation Association, and we have a high-speed rail committee there, which actually is the largest committee at APTA. APTA is the largest, it's got about 1,500 members representing transportation systems around the United States. And we want to be advocates for an initiative like this. I'm also working with, we have an organization called One Rail, and all of the freights, Amtrak, a lot of the contractors and vendors, all the labor unions are all part of it. And so that's another group of folks that we're enticing to get interested in the bill. And then finally, I'm with the Biden Committee on Infrastructure for the Biden campaign. And so we're working there to promote it in the campaign and with the convention.
Thank you, David. Erica, I know you've been a supporter of the bank, and you've come on and you've become very energetic to be able to do it. But what's the one thing, what do you think is the most important thing about this bank? What is it that excites you and has said, I really need to get on board with this?
The most exciting for me personally is to be able to close what we see a lot, which is happening with our rural and urban divide. And that divide is happening both, we can say a digital divide is happening both where we talk about economic divide, and we can even see it what's happening politically across the landscape, and unfortunately where people are no longer coming together socially. So we're talking at the economic, social, and digital divide. When there, and I'm not going to be able to quote this perfectly, and I know a lot of my labor buffs out there are, but there is actually a study that was done that when there are good jobs and opportunities for people, that we see a lot of turmoil and unrest, especially when we see crimes where it has to do with race and racism. It decreases because people are able to provide for their families and they're able to have a solid economic and social mobility for themselves and their families. So we don't have those other issues that we start to look for, right? That may be going on in our communities and that, but because we're able to provide or to work around or work together. That's probably the better thing to say. So I'm excited about being able to build for the next generation. And I think it's something for myself that is owed from those who build it for me to be able to be as a union leader and to have really great wages and to be able to provide that for my family, and to look at my children who are graduating college and not being able to have that opportunity to bridge that, to be that bridge, to bring that gap and close that divide. I am excited, and I'm excited about where we're going. It's about time we have high-speed rail. We should not be lagging behind other countries like China. It's about time that we have real high-speed broadband. It's about time that we have jobs that support people when they graduate high school or when they graduate college. I mean, I'm excited to see now. We just want to add this last thing, and we've talked about that, the fiber build out in smart cities. Those things are important. For us to move ahead in the future, we've got to start now. And I'm excited that we're able to start to really build and move that bridge to where it needs to be.
Very good. I mean, I'm a firm believer in grassroots making a difference. At the end of the day, most of the things that happen in the world are initiated by a small group of people who have that motivation to get it started. They get the ball rolling, they get the parade going, and once the parade gets built, politicians are always willing to run to the front and lead us across the finish line. But if we don't do that hard work, and that's what we're asking all of you out there to consider doing, is joining us in the hard work that's necessary to build the parade, to get the National Infrastructure Bank on the radar of the Biden the Biden campaign, but also the Trump administration, to be able for them to understand how important infrastructure is to the country. We're Americans. We should be working together for America to be able to do that kind of stuff, and that's really important. One last thing I want to do here is Tom Carey, unfortunately, had an internet connection malfunction, so he's not going to be able to join us, etc. So I'm going to ask Jason Parker to be the pinch hitter and kind of sum this whole thing up, what he sees as being the most important thing about this bank, to make sure that people out there are involved and really have that passion to help us build this movement. So Jason, I'm going to give you the final words to close this segment out.
Thank you. I just want to agree with Erica about the compounding effect of frustrations from economics and how it has an effect socially amongst people. I think that was a profound statement. I appreciate hearing that. But getting involved is reaching out to your politicians, reaching out to your local unions, to your councils, your AFL-CIOs, and bring to them the gravitas of the moment we're facing right now economically. We got tens of millions of people that are unemployed, and I mean the studies are coming out, and the GDP numbers are just atrocious, and a lot of these jobs are not coming back. And we're going to have to retool these people, and give them a life. I mean, somehow, some way, we've got to be able to do this. And this is a perfect way to do it. FDR did it. He got us out of the Great Depression. And I think we can resemble that completely in this moment and actually take this moment to improve our infrastructure. That will bring back all those factories from China, which we lost 60,000 of them in the beginning of the 2000s, and put people to work and give them a middle-class living, the American dream, the ability to own a home, the ability to improve their children's education. And, you know, one of the things about becoming a tradesperson is, it's that continuation of development of yourself. You come in and you realize that even after high school, you redevelop yourself over and over. And that transforms itself into getting a bachelor in the sciences and moving on and developing our citizenry until we can do anything that is what we are as America. And I believe that this is a fantastic first step and a huge one and a must need.
Thank you very much. I see, Tom, you were able to join us back in here. So Jason just pinch hit for you and closed it out, but we're going to give you the final word to be able to sum up what you think this bank means to America today and how we can make this a reality.
Thank you, everybody. Listen, you know, when I first met the people that were involved with the National Infrastructure Bank and they talked about this bill, I was very excited. I brought it back to my members. We talk about infrastructure and how vital it is to every community across the country. You know, we talk about our dams and our water and our sewer, and we could go on and on for days. This is about jobs for every American. We're talking $4 trillion plus. This means jobs for well over 25 million people. I'm sure my brother Jason mentioned it. I'm sure Erica, Laura, David, every one of you have probably touched on what I'm about to touch on. Jobs for our members is critical. Post-COVID-19, we could not be bringing this bill forward at a more critical time in our country where it's going to create jobs that are going to be lost for many of our members because of what COVID did to us. So I can't stress enough, HR 6422, we need to get this bill passed. I ask every one of you, you know, everybody listening, please speak to everybody you know, and let's get this bill moving forward. Thank you, everybody.
And I want to thank everybody on the panel, Jason, David, Laura, Erica, and Thomas, for all your great words of wisdom. And okay, people out there, it's up to you. You're the ones, the ball's in your court now. Thank you for joining us today. We have a panel of elected officials to share their thoughts and opinions on how HR 6422, the National Infrastructure Bank Act of 2020, could impact our neighborhoods, regions, and the country as a whole. We have a lot to discuss, and so let's meet our panel.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's an honor to join you. My name is Lisa Hicks-Clayton. I am a Dearborn Heights, that's Dearborn Heights, Michigan, City Council member, and I also am the Community Liaison Constituent Services for our state senator, Betty Jean Alexander, and it's an honor to join you today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be on the call. I'm currently the state senator for District 12 in Rhode Island, which is all of Middletown, all of Little Compton, Rhode Island, Tiverton, and Newport. I am the first vice chair of the Senate Committee on Finance, member of the Senate Education Committee, and also a senior deputy majority leader in the Rhode Island Senate. And I'm currently serving my 6th term, my 12th year. Glad to be here.
Good morning, everyone. It's exciting to be here. I am Delegate Elizabeth Guzman. I represent the 31st District in the House of Delegates in Virginia, which includes parts of Prince William and Fauquier counties. I was elected as the first Hispanic female immigrant to the Virginia Assembly. I'm currently serving as the chair of the Subcommittee on Social Services, vice chair of Education, and a member of the Labor Committee. So I recently elected also as a DNC member to represent Virginia as the first Latina. So I'm very excited to be here today with you.
My name is Robert Williams. I represent District 62 in South Carolina General Assembly. I've served the last 14 years in the General Assembly. I'm also a member of the Agricultural Committee. I'm also a member of the Legislative Oversight Committee in the House of Representatives. I'm currently a retired military from the United States Army soldier, and I'm a Iraq veteran of Iraq veteran war. So I'm just glad to be on the call, and I hope that we can kind of work towards getting our nation built back. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to be here today. And with a name like Zorinsky, obviously, I'm used to being last. But I've been a councilwoman since my election in 2017, and I'm a candidate for state representative in the 138 district, which all is in Northampton County in the Lehigh Valley.
Well, thank you for being with us. With that being said, my name is Bob Lynn. I'm a retired union organizer with Plumbers and Pipefitters. I live in Toledo, Ohio, and I have been involved with the coalition for 3 or 4 years now, as we've been trying to get this resolution introduced into Congress. We were lucky enough to get it introduced March 31st of this year by Representatives Danny Davis from Illinois and Representative Seth Moulton from Massachusetts. The bill itself is H.R. 6422, and we're going to be talking about that bill, but please look up that kind of information. You can visit our website at National Infrastructure Bank Coalition, NIB Coalition.com, to be able to get further details about that. With that being said, what we're going to start off with here is kind of do a roundtable discussion. And so the first question I'm going to ask and kind of throw open for discussion here is, I know you've been instrumental in getting resolutions passed and spreading the word about the bank. What are you currently working on, and how could others get involved? Tara, since you were last, we're going to ask you to go first.
Thank you so much. Well, in September of 2019, I introduced a resolution for consideration for the support of the National Infrastructure Bank. It made a lot of sense to me. The final vote was 5-1 out of the 9 council members who sit. And then I started joining the calls on this semi-regular basis. In February of 2020, we all went to the National Association of Counties annual convention in Washington, D.C., where I introduced a similar resolution in support of H.R. 6422, and that got overwhelming support and passed. And then most recently, I hosted a panel discussion on the National Infrastructure Bank and the benefits of monetizing our growing debt to fund major infrastructure projects like high-speed rail, broadband, healthcare, education, renewable energy, grid expansion, and creating 25 million jobs. This was really interesting because Representative James Robach was on the phone. Obviously, we had union leaders supporting legislation like Bob on the phone or on the Zoom call. And beyond this, I've been contacting local union leadership to educate them and their membership on the benefits of job creation in this kind of infrastructure building.
Well, thank you for that. Delegate Guzman, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us what you've been working on.
Sure. I would be remiss first if I don't acknowledge the work of everyone on this call and the people behind the scenes as activists on this issue. For the past, I would say we're going into the 4th year here in Virginia. We have been introducing this resolution for the past 3 years, 2018, 2019, and most recently this year. It's, we have to, there's a lot of work to do. We were under, for the past 26 years. So it's something that people need to be educated and recognize the benefits and how this could be instrumental, right, in bringing our economy back from the brink of collapse. So that's what we're doing right now with my colleagues in the Virginia Assembly. Very excited, that H.R. 6422 was introduced in the House of Representatives. Way to go. And I think the next step for me is to be in the National Leadership Council for the Biden campaign. I'm also mentioning the Biden team as they edge closer to the White House.
Thank you very much for that. How about Senator DePalma, if you wouldn't mind sharing us what you've been working on?
Absolutely. So as been indicated already, we've had this resolution in the Rhode Island Senate for a few years now. It got introduced again this year. Obviously, with COVID-19, we've not been meeting for several months, like several other delegations in other states. I've been working to push that, but more importantly, the reason why it's important to me, it's important to Rhode Island. I think it's important to the nation. It's about rebuilding our infrastructure, and rebuilding it now will cost us less later. I spent a fair amount of time over the years in Rhode Island on infrastructure funding, sustainable transportation funding. We've put in place something to work us to get there. Clearly not enough money. We do have a state infrastructure bank, a Rhode Island infrastructure bank. I understand and appreciate the value of that. The communities I represent have benefited from that. They've benefited across the state of Rhode Island, both from an investment in Rhode Island, it's an investment in the economy, and as importantly as it has been said, it's an investment in people and jobs, good paying jobs. The other piece, I'm also a pledged delegate to the Abiding campaign, and I'm now a member of the policy committee, specifically the infrastructure, and more specifically the grid and the stimulus, the subcommittee on stimulus, on the funding of infrastructure. And I'm excited that the platform that's being voted on includes a bank as being described here as part of the language. It doesn't just show up once, it shows up a few times in the platform. So it's important that this message gets communicated, the work that's been going on with the team nationwide, contiguous 48, Alaska, I think maybe Hawaii as well. So this is not something unique to Rhode Island, unique to New England, the Northeast. It's a challenge that needs to be addressed United States wide, countrywide, and the investment at that level, without necessarily requiring additional money from the federal government, but using existing debt, is important. And that's why I stand behind this.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Hicks Clayton, please.
Right. Yes. So again, I work for Michigan State Senator Betty Jean Alexander, which is the 5th Senate District, and that is part of Southeast Michigan, including Detroit, Redford, Dearborn Heights, Inkster, and Garden City. Our Chief of Staff, Lamar Lemons, has been very involved and engaged with the coalition, and he brought the team on board more recently, and we started joining the calls. And I found the calls very informative, very engaging, but also, again, the importance of this subject is so critical, not just to Michigan, but across the nation. But when I think of Michigan, we think of the Flint water crisis. We think of, a lot of our municipalities and suburbs are aging communities, which means we have aging infrastructure, which presents challenges for many of our communities, especially during this COVID virus pandemic, because we do know that shared revenue and other things are going to be reduced, which impacts greatly the amount of work that can be done that's needed to be done, as well as mandated. So the first thing I was asked to do was to draft a resolution, which what I did do, and we had 3 of our communities adopt it right away. So they adopted the resolutions because it appeals to local leaders. We all want to fix the things that need to be fixed. All of our communities in Michigan have identified lead leads into homes, and all of those have been mandated by EGLE, which is our former MDEQ, to replace those in a timeline. So everybody was very interested and very supportive. Plus, when we talk about jobs and creating jobs and sustaining opportunity for people to work and quality of life, that was a great idea, and people supported it. So we had unanimous support from our councils in those 3 communities. What we're doing now is we've now taken the resolution and created a packet that is going to every single municipality in Wayne County, Michigan, but that's 34 communities, municipalities with their elected officials. Every one of them are getting a packet from us that explains a little bit more about NIB, the importance of the National Infrastructure Bank. The HR 6422 is included in that packet, along with the brochure. We're reaching out to all of them and asking them to adopt the resolution as well. So that is a grassroots organization effort on something that's so important that needs to be done to all of our communities across the nation.
Thank you very much for that. Representative Williams, if you wouldn't mind sharing us what's going on in South Carolina.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all the panelists that are on the line here, and for the great work that each one of them are doing in their surrounding areas. I just want to add to the fact that no matter where we are geographically here in the nation, our needs are the same, whether it's building roads or building bridges or whatever the case may be. We're just separated in location, but certainly our needs are certainly the same throughout this nation. And certainly that's one of the reasons why I was so interested in getting this done. Several years ago, a couple of years ago, I would say, basically, we introduced the infrastructure bill here in South Carolina. And actually, we actually ended up passing it in the House of Representatives. And now it's headed to the Senate. So we're going to have to work hard to kind of get the Senate to approve it. And hopefully we can get the governor to sign it, and it can become a great resolution here for South Carolina. South Carolina is like all other states. We're in great need of infrastructure. And certainly, and that goes without saying. Due to the recently weather that we've been having here, tornadoes and waterfall, a lot of our infrastructure has deteriorated, and to the point where it must be rebuilt. You know, we've been having water storm drainage problems. Water been piling up in certain areas where the pipes are dilapidated, are broken, and it is in certain areas in South Carolina has become rivers, little streams, because of the infrastructure that is not in place. So our needs are great here in South Carolina. Hopefully that if we can get this NIB up and running nationwide, we can solve a lot of the problems that we're having statewide, especially in our rural areas where folks are leaving because there's no opportunity for them to live in those areas. So they're migrating to bigger and urban areas, and those areas are getting packed, leaving our rural areas at a waste and becoming deteriorated. Farmers are not farming those lands, and land is just sitting up. So we're having some challenges here in South Carolina, but hopefully we can get this NIB up and running, where we can really start attracting businesses here, so that we can have folks to move back to our rural areas, so that we can get broadband internet services to our folks who live in those areas who are still going to school. Our school kids having access to broadband so that they can do their educational work. So the needs are great. Let's not minimize that. The needs are great, and everyone here in America shouldn't. You know, we should have a system where everyone, no matter where you live or where your zip code, you should have access to certain things to make your life better here in America. So with that being said, these are some of the things that I've been working on. We have debilitating bridges that are falling down before us, and cars still traveling on them. We have dams that are still out due to the rainfall. So we're just having a multi-faceted problems here in South Carolina, but hopefully we're working on all these things.
Well, thank you very much for that. It's pretty apparent as we go around this table here that we've got going, that all the communities throughout not only your districts, et cetera, but throughout the United States, we're seeing these kinds of struggles and same type of challenges that are going on. I guess the one thing that we could do is how do we get more people involved to be able to understand why this is important? And I guess I want to just kind of throw that out there, because we're showing this obviously to the Democratic National Convention. They've got an opportunity to put it in a plank, but if we're going to actually make this bank happen, it's going to take a lot of people to get involved, to have to start doing it. So how can people reach out and become more involved with this? Senator, you want to dive in on that and see if you got any suggestions that people can jump on?
All right. Well, a couple suggestions. I think folks should reach out to delegates to the convention. Some are going to say, "How do I find that out?" That might be a challenge. I think you can reach out to in the case of the Biden campaign, I think the same thing should be done for the President Trump campaign. From a Biden campaign perspective, reach out to local state leaders, local state officials. They're probably going to know somebody who is a delegate now. That's one thing. The second thing, as things are put together, and we've known this from the past, there are things that expect to happen on day one. Things we want to happen the first 100 days. How do we get that included in the mix of things that need to be set up and begun on day one, things in the first 100 days? But if we back all that up, I'm a firm believer. So I'm an engineer by training. That's what I do every day. And everything for me goes back to facts and data. We have to be able to articulate why the infrastructure bank's important. Why is the infrastructure bank needed? Let's forget about the what, who, when, where, and how. But we've clearly to talk about why it's needed. While we might be separated geographically, we are clearly united from the perspective of the need across the nation. And anybody, what I'd say to folks is, bring your project from your state to the table that everyone will rally around and say, oh yes, that bridge, that piece of grid infrastructure, that road, that highway, that whatever that they can resonate with. We need to personalize it, not make it personal. We need to personalize it. And when we do that, the why is the light bulb will go off. And then people say, okay, how can I help? Then we talk about the piece with regards to the money. The money quickly becomes the issue that everybody will quickly gravitate towards. And as been communicated, we're not about creating new debt. We're about using existing debt that we have. The last piece I want to be able to articulate is, because the details are important. Some will say, well, the money's got to come from somewhere. Well, if we look at how infrastructure projects are done today, the vast majority of them, or a good number of them, it's a public-private partnership, or it's a public-public partnership for the most part, where there's federal money that's then matched by state money, typically an 80-20 match kind of thing. Well, what we're going to do with the bank is, potentially, the bank would be probably a larger amount for the 80 match for the state to match the 20. We have many projects across our state of Rhode Island, and some of them now have been impacted because of COVID-19, because of the impacts on our state budget, because of what we've had to take out of our capital program that would have been done with some of that. That money's going to have to go to somewhere else. So I think come back to where we came, full circle to where it is. Engage local state leaders, delegates, communicate an interest. I think the other piece is communicating a willingness to say, how can I help? And then it comes down to it's phone calls, it might be an email. I don't think it's very hard, but there's the other phrase of many hands make light work, and there's strength in numbers. That's clearly the case here.
I totally agree. And what I'm going to ask each of you to kind of summarize really quickly is, what's the one point, why do you support the bank? What's important to you about this bank? And we'll start with Delegate Guzman. Sure.
Thank you for the question. Well, what I would say is this program is what America needs. We need to restart large-scale manufacturing here in the United States to provide for new. Currently, this could be able to help us rebuild from a deadly pandemic and ensure a jobs guarantee for all those seeking work who were laid off from COVID-19.
Well, I look at this and I see that our state and local governments are all looking for money right now. We want to find solutions, and this is just perfect timing for the HR 6422 to take off and to implement the National Infrastructure Bank. When FDR first introduced the first New Deal after the Great Depression, he did so because it was government intervention to provide stability and hope for not only businesses and labor, but also farmers and families and working families. And I think we see that there is such a need right now for small businesses and Main Street and working families to have a fair wage and to create jobs that aren't necessarily taken over by industry giants like Amazon, Google, Apple. Our state and local budgets need this money to create these programs, just like FDR did after the Great Depression. And so I think that the timing with the pandemic and with the need and the loss of jobs that we see, it's going to be a well-received solution because it's been backed before. It's not something new. It's not something radical. We've done this before, and we can do it again.
I want to share really the same sentiment that we've just heard, but there's a real challenge, a real struggle for local municipalities not only in Michigan, but throughout the nation. As I indicated earlier, we have aging and failing infrastructure. We have federally mandated projects that municipalities cannot pay for, nor, they're concerned about these projects getting done with the timeline they have. They're concerned because of the pandemic, we have high unemployment. This would bring great paying jobs that are union jobs, from my understanding, 25 million, which would help to stabilize communities and ensure that they're vibrant communities moving forward. I see the National Infrastructure Bank as a solution for that, especially during a time of so much uncertainty. I think people need that. Local leaders need that to be able to deliver that message of hope. And this National Infrastructure Bank, through the funding mechanism of HR 6422, would provide that.
But hopefully with this NIB in operation, and if we can get it up and running, it would set the course a long time. And we're going to have to start not thinking just for now. We're going to have to start thinking about the future of our kids and our grandkids who are coming behind us. And I hope that, we can leave this world better than what we found it. And I think that the damage that we've already caused to this nation is great. But I think that we're at a time in our life during this pandemic, and now we're at a time in our life when we can make better decisions that will help those who are coming behind us.
My name is Carl Holland. I worked on the presidential campaigns of Bernie Sanders, both in 2016 as well as in 2020. I'm currently a state delegate for the DNC, representing the state of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I'm working to bring the party together to support our nominee. I'm really passionate about solving our economic crisis right now. And I just want to make sure that people can find work and have work that pays a living wage, and especially for young adults. So that's why I think that the National Infrastructure Bank is really important. So we're just going to go around, and everybody, if they can give their introduction.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rudy Arredondo. I'm the president of the National Latino Farmers and Ranchers Trade Association. My interest and my work has been in all rural America almost exclusively, with a few stops here and there. I worked in rural economic development, bringing up infrastructure with the use of USDA programs. And I have seen, ever since I've worked in rural America, the deterioration of the infrastructure, and it's been of great concern to us because there isn't sufficient resources to be able to address those deficiencies, and it's been impacting our market delivery. We have been extremely concerned about the fact that we have droughts, we have had wildfires, and we had flooding. As farmers and ranchers, we have we're the first responders with regard to protecting our property.
I am Lamar Lemons. I'm a former state legislator, state representative over 20 years ago. I've also was the president of the largest school district here in the state of Michigan, the Detroit Public School District. And I also currently have come out of retirement and am now serving as the chief of staff for State Senator Betty Jean Alexander. I have been involved with the National Infrastructure Bank advocacy since long before we had a bill. I was there and played a significant role in convincing Representative Davis of Illinois to take up our cause, in which so is now House Bill 6422. We also, before the bill was done, we introduced legislation in the Michigan State Senate, a resolution, a joint resolution, Senate and House, for the infrastructure bank. Unfortunately, it has languished in committee, and we will amend it to include House Resolution, U.S. House Resolution, HR 6422, which is the resolution for a national infrastructure bank. It is critical that we have a national infrastructure bank for the purposes of developing our old and decaying cities, the infrastructure, the schools, buildings, the internet, the making Wi-Fi and broadband available throughout the nation, and in particular in urban areas where right now certain groups of people, where it's accessible, but certain groups of people can't afford it to have it directly piped into their homes. The National Infrastructure Bank will allow cities to and other entities to bring 21st century into their homes, and which would help the education gap in the urban areas from the rest of the nation. And so that's why I'm an advocate for this legislation before it became legislation, and for the general policy as a whole.
Very much. I'm really excited to be part of this initiative. My life began in Michigan back in 1944 when the FDR started basically with the original or one of the original infrastructure banks. So I grew up as a farm worker, and today I'm retired as a professor in business and law at San Francisco State, and I also had a second career, retired as a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army. I'm excited to be part of this coalition. I'm also a member of the board of the National Latino Farmers and Ranchers. I wanted to come back and do something for the people that I love the most, and that is Latino and Native American population. So I'm very much involved with the Native American population in Arizona. So I'm an educator. I think this initiative is a wonderful thing. You know, I was part of the war on poverty back in the late 60s into the 70s. So I see, and I'm still very involved with states like Idaho, in Arizona and Montana. And I believe that things haven't changed to some degree in all these, 50, 60 years since I left the cotton fields and the potato fields. So I'm excited with all my skills and education that I have to really be a part of this initiative. And, I feel like I can be a good spokesperson for the various communities that we're serving here. And I'm very much interested in furthering infrastructure throughout the nation.
Yes, my name is Wendell Stimley. I am emeritus director for the National Association of Minority Contractors. We are addressing some of the deficiencies in the Department of Transportation when it comes to infrastructure. And one of the key elements we hope to solve with the infrastructure bank is the states applying for funding to be compliant with the DBE program within inside the Department of Transportation, and to make compliance a requirement versus an aspiration of the infrastructure funding.
My name is John Verdejo. I am a member of the Democratic National Committee from North Carolina. My interest in the bank is this, really, is I just believe we need to go in a different direction, basically. I just think it's due time that perhaps we need to start thinking much bigger on an old idea, an idea that's basically been around since the beginning of this country. It's something that we need to basically bring back. This is something that is going to tackle plenty of issues in one full swoop. It's going to help build this country and provide jobs to millions and millions of folks who need it, especially now with COVID being where it is right now. And this is going to offer opportunities. There's plenty of folks who although it's honorable and it's good to go into post-high school education, yet there's a certain segment of us in our population, Black, Latino community, Native American community, that for whatever reason or another, due to family obligations, what have you, this is their best shot to the middle class. You know, there are folks that simply want to work with their hands. They want to see stuff built, and they grade with their hands. From this, many jobs will be created. Businesses can be spawned from it. Small businesses can be spawned from it. And for all that, that's the reason why I am a part of this, and I'm fierce supporter of this. I was also proud to pass at the DNC convention. I forget which meeting, but I believe in 2017, I helped pass a resolution for the Democratic National Committee to support this. And part of that resolution is now, part of that language is now included in a platform that's actually being presented in front of the convention. And I'm very, very proud that I was a part of that.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we'll take those were excellent introductions. Now we're on to the question and answer portion of the panel. So we're gonna go in the same order. I have questions here for each of the panelists. So we're gonna start with Rudy Irredondo. So as a national farm leader, can you describe the crisis gripping the farm sector in terms of farm bankruptcies, lack of infrastructure, hospitals that may be closing, and how the National Infrastructure Bank could address that situation?
Well, we have probably one of the first NGOs that supported this through a resolution, and I'm very proud to be a part of the infrastructure initiative. We have so much infrastructure that has been deteriorated ever since I started working in rural America. But I too started out as a farm worker, transitioned from farm worker to farm ownership with my family. We have 7 small family farms in northwestern Ohio, and we have seen the neglect that has pretty much depopulated our rural areas. The youth have gone because there is very little for them to do in those areas as a result of the conglomerates aggregating and just taking up consolidation of the farm contracting, which is basically you're a slave on your own farm, through Cargill's, JBS, which is now owned by Brazil. And it does not provide sufficient sustainable income for our folks. They have to have an off-the-farm income in order to be able to sustain their farms. And so we have a rural infrastructure that hasn't been dealt with since FDR. Since that time, it's just deteriorated, and like I said, it's depopulating our folks. So those are just briefly some of the concerns that we have with regard to our infrastructure in rural America.
All right. So for my next question, this one is for Mr. Lamar Lemons. You are a past president of the Detroit School Board and a state legislator. Much of our urban infrastructure is, as you know, in a pretty bad state. We have collapsing water systems. We have affordable housing, which is in need of repair. How do you see the National Infrastructure Bank applying itself to end inequality that the nation faces?
I think that the National Infrastructure Bank is critical and provides the most reasonable avenue for the redevelopment of our cities, and particularly some of the archaic piping, which includes lead, which we now need to be remediated, but is cost prohibitive, and which is also has a tremendous health consequences from having leaded water. And everyone knows about what happened in Flint. Also, the educational system, the archaic and decaying buildings. We need to have a 21st century model of schools. We need to have good paying jobs, and the National Infrastructure Bank will provide the revenues and access to the revenues and resources for redeveloping our school system, redeveloping our infrastructure, including critical infrastructure such as water, as well as broadband, access to where there is, which is at low cost because there is broadband in the major cities. However, everyone doesn't have access to it because everyone can't afford it. And most importantly, healthcare and healthcare workers, hospitalization, housing, all of these things can be addressed through a national infrastructure bank, and the monies that the jobs it will create will put the revenues back into the system and make it easily and affordable for those entities that borrow from the bank to be able to pay that money back where necessary.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so my next question is for Dr. Martinez. So beyond your time teaching and organizing in California, which is a state that's near and dear to my heart, you have also been devoting your efforts to solving many of the problems in the Native American community. Can you elaborate on how you see the National Infrastructure Bank helping to alleviate the problems in the Native American community?
Well, I hugely support the National Infrastructure Bank. The problems in the Navajo Nation is one example. There's the same problems in other tribal nations, as well as the infrastructure is really way behind. In the Navajo Nation, for example, the water systems have been depleted in some cases, utilized. They have uranium problems, things like that. So the infrastructure issues with the Navajo Nation are a priority, along with the schools, the health systems. It's amazing how they have been left so far behind. And this is why we have such a major problem with health. And that to the issues previously discussed here, yeah, we need a complete revamping of healthcare systems, or at least bringing them current. In the Navajo Nation is a very good example, and as other nations as well, in Idaho as well. So, and throughout the country. So yeah, I would say in general, education, healthcare, transportation, broadband, that's huge. Technology, I think that's going to be great. So I think in summation, I think those are the things that we need in rural America to include Latinos, for example, in Idaho and Montana, where they have some of the similar problems that have existed for decades and decades.
All right. So yeah, my next question is for Mr. Wendell Stemley. So as a leader of the NAMC, can you describe the crisis in the business community as far as bankruptcies, lost jobs, etc., and how we can enforce the law regarding disadvantaged business enterprises, and how we can hire more minority workers?
Yeah, I mean, we get a double whammy in business, small business, urban community-based and rural-based business. Whenever there's a natural disaster, we are the most affected, but yet as soon as the disaster takes place, new guidance comes down for non-utilization of DBE firms, diversity, workforce development or inclusion, etc. So not only are we then damaged by the pandemic or national disaster, we are eliminated from participating in the rebuilding of our own communities or the surrounding communities. So we face the economic challenge of one having limited commercial access during that disaster or infrastructure rebuild. And then we have the guidance that's sent down from the government to not worry about utilization of workforce development or vendor, supplier, subcontractor base. So we have to use entities like the Infrastructure Bank and others to write new guidance that, the utilization of small business, minority firms, workforce development is a consistent message that we want to keep out there regardless of the transitional times we may be in. We've now come to find out that we have a new normal. Natural disasters are going to happen every 90 days in some way, shape, or form. And now we're being hit with a pandemic. So if you have a tornado, you have a hurricane, you have COVID-19, whatever may happen, we still have to keep a process of engagement, because those are the boot on the ground employers of the workers that are usually most affected by that event.
Definitely. All right. So my last question is for Mr. Verdeo. So one of the biggest problems facing young people is what to do after high school. Many young people don't want to go to college, and others do want to go to college, but are worried that if they do, they'll get saddled with unpayable debt, and the chances of them getting a job that can pay off that debt are slim. So my question for you is, how can the National Infrastructure Bank address the dilemma which people of my generation are faced with?
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that question. Yeah, it offers many opportunities, as I mentioned before, where, yeah, it's true. I think it's not a matter that young people don't want to go to college, just that they're faced with a reality that some of us, even in my generation, didn't necessarily grab hold to. And that is, yeah, you can go to college, but they're going to be debt saddled that you're going to pay, for a lifetime almost. Through the National Infrastructure Bank, again, it offers plenty of opportunities. And I'm thinking big terms here, where I'm thinking you have, well, I'm saying like this. This generation that's coming before us, they're more entrepreneurial than we are. They're more business minded. They're more, I want to do stuff on my own type generation. So with this, I'm thinking it offers jobs. Most of them, if they work hard at it, can become prime contractors instead of the subcontractors that often sometimes get the end of the stick. They're the ones that can control their own destiny. They can go back into the communities that they're from, help rebuild the community from a broadband standpoint, from a building standpoint, from a road standpoint, because many in the community, many stuff in the community needs some upgrading. The kids are coming up now, the young people, I shouldn't say kids, the young people coming up behind us, they're looking around, they see that the environment is such that, work needs to be done. So, by offering this other avenue of, okay, if college not necessary for you, which is more of a technological base where, it ebbs and flows, let's offer them something that's more sustainable, that's more concrete, that's more, that's going to sustain you for almost the rest of your life.